just introducing the lesson, then I forgot we were recording. So, we've looked at perfect competition, and I know colleagues around the UK are looking at my videos at the moment because I had a guest in from another local school lately, and he said to me, I see that with your Year 12 students you've already started into market structures. So, thanks, you know who you are, keep watching, keep subscribing. So, we've been looking at perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition and oligopoly, and we've done all the diagrams for it. So that leaves us with a couple of additional market structures to look at. So today, ladies and gentlemen, for your delectation, we're going to be looking at the whole notion of something actually which was mentioned to us when we were in Brussels, on the inaugural Brussels study visit. If you want to know more about that, geekonomics.co.uk/events. You can read a full roundup and see some photographs. But I'm going to start on to natural monopoly today. Natural monopoly. Not just monopoly, a natural monopoly. So let's get that down then, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there's a particular industry in the UK at the moment, and those of you who went on the Brussels study visit, it will not have escaped your notice, I am sure, that there is a particular industry in the UK where the government has really struggled to introduce market forces and competitive markets and competition, and unfortunately it's been taken back into public ownership. So it used to be owned by the government, the public sector, then it was booted out into the private sector, they at least tried to, and now it's come back. So it's what your generation, you're referred to as the boomerang generation. And what does that mean? What is a boomerang? So if I had a boomerang here and I went, shh, what happens? Sid and I from Australia, so you'll know that, yes? Yes, when you launch a boomerang, the theory goes, obviously, that it spins around, then it comes back. Now, you people, because of financial and economic circumstance, i.e. house prices being so expensive, your generation is now, or it's a little bit older than you, are now being referred to as the boomerang generation, because you're living at home with your parents, and then you move out perhaps to do 3-4 years at university, but then you find that when you get a job, you can't actually afford to buy a house, and unfortunately for your parents then, you end up boomeranging back into the family home once again. How terrible is that for your parents? So, you leave, and then you're coming back, and you're maybe staying until you're 35, 40 years old, and you've still got your 1D posters on the wall, and Cliff Richard and all the favourite bands of the day. Charleston's there. When we were in Brussels, he was looking up a new one by Snake. He's got a double album now, hasn't he, Snake?
I'm in Drake.
Drake, yeah. It's alright, I'll edit that out. Yeah. Drake. He's got a new double album. It's pretty tip top, isn't it? Okay. So, what industry has boomeranged back into public ownership?
Rail.
The rail. All of it, or just? Okay, the North East Coast franchise, which was, of course, owned and operated by Nickel, you should know because we were on it. Virgin Rail, and now it's back under public ownership because they simply could not make it work. They couldn't make it profitable enough. And this is what you'll see when we start to do this diagram for natural monopoly. This is one of the fundamental problems with a natural monopoly. It's very, very difficult to introduce competitive forces into it. Now, let's say we're looking at the rail industry in more detail. So where does the northeast line go, Alex?
From Newcastle.
Okay, but it doesn't stop at Newcastle, so you can go, I think it goes right to, I have got the train up to, go on Sydney,
Does it go to Edinburgh?
and beyond,
Does it?
done and beyond.
What's up there?
Oh well actually, when you get to Edinburgh, let me just clarify, I think it changes to ScotRail actually, so you might be right, Edinburgh. Right. So, we're going from Edinburgh all the way down to London. Alright, on the east coast. And obviously, what do you need in order to run a train operation? You need trains. Okay? So you need the rolling stock, as it's called. What else do you need?
Trains.
You need the railway, you need the track. Yeah? What else do you need?
Operators.
You need, no, what do you mean by operators? Okay, you need the workforce, staff.
The driver.
Okay, you need all that. Okay, so what would you call all of that? There are other things, but what would you call all those things together? Because all of that is enormously expensive, but what would you call it? That is the railway. It is a barrier to entry, but what is all of that?
Sunk costs.
Okay, right now we're getting somewhere, thank you Max. We're getting somewhere there, so these would be your sunk cost, and the sunk costs are being invested into these things here, which I would call the capital or the infrastructure, the infrastructure. Now, all of that together, that could cost you billions of pounds. But, and this is where I wish you'd all been in Brussels when we were talking to Michael, who was the partner responsible for sort of competition law at Gibson Dunn in Brussels. Because he gave us an example of this, and he then said something which I thought I must mention that when we were looking at natural monopoly. He then said, once all of that investment has been made, even though it's enormously expensive, obviously. So he was talking, I think, in the context of British Telecom providing the infrastructure for telecommunications. Once all of that investment has been made, how much does it then cost to provide someone with a phone line to their home or a seat on a train to Newcastle? How much does it cost?
Just as much as the fuel it costs to get there, so nothing.
Basically nothing, yes. Once you have laid out all the money on these things, it's not really costing you hardly anything to transport an additional person. Yeah, you might need an extra carriage, but in the grand scheme of things, your costs, once you've invested in these, as Robert quite rightly said, these enormous sunk costs, once you can get, it's like climbing a mountain, and you climb the mountain of sunk costs and you've made all that investment, it's downhill from thereafter, because it doesn't cost you hardly anything to then administer someone a ticket and transport them from A to B. That's really is small. Now, as a consequence of that, what impact would that have on your costs if you are Mr. Virgin Rail or Great Northern or whatever? What would that do to your costs as you increase your output? Or what would your cost be initially? It's maybe a better thing to say. What would your cost be initially? Pitchfork? Costs. Initially. So you've got hardly any capacity because you're not investing enough in rolling stock. So you've got to buy more trains, you've got to build more track. What's your cost going to be?
Really high.
High, low, Z?
High.
Excuse me?
High.
Correct. Oh, hi guys. Yes. High. Up here. So your initial investment costs are very, very high. But once you get over these big costs and you start bringing more and more revenues in at very, very little extra cost to yourselves, what then starts to happen to your average costs as you produce more or supply more journeys? They will decrease. And indeed, we've looked before, if you recall, at U-shaped cost curves, if you remember, and ATC goes like that. Indeed, perfect competition, monopolistic competition, we're always drawing ATC U-shaped. But what's going to happen if you're a natural monopoly? Because it's not U-shaped. What's going to happen? That is a question. Nobody? Nickel?
Is it sort of like L-shaped sort of thing, like it goes down and
Okay, could be. Close, yes. And what would be your reasoning for that, Nickel?
because as your output increases, your like average costs will decrease basically.
Because you're getting more money in from customers, but actually providing your customer with that service, it's now not costing you any money really, because you've made the big investment to start with. Is that your sort of thinking on it? Or am I just putting words in your mouth, Nickel? That's okay. Okay, fair dues. What were you going to say to now?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, thank you. Are you just agreeing because it's the legend Nickel?
No, I was basically just going to say that it would decrease, but I don't know if that's right.
And what you thinking? Just the same sort of rationale?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Does the labour costs not account for like a lot of cost overall with her? Because she really did pay quite a lot just for the work and stuff.
Well, if you think about a train, whether the train is 1 carriage or 10 carriages, 1 conductor.
Yeah, but did they not have
If you think about a train, whether it's 1 carriage or 10 carriages, 1 driver.
But did they not have the stuff like behind the scenes?
Admin staff.
Yeah.
But that you're not going to employ, so for every additional passenger, you don't need to employ an additional worker, do you? So they don't rise in proportion with the number of passengers that you get. So, Nathan, what do you think? John Locke Institute.
Would it be like just an elastic curve down?
An elastic curve down, okay, yes.
Me?
Yes.
I just don't really care because it tends towards you.
No, Philip, that's remarkable. A curve that tends towards 0. In other words, now Philip, as much as I regret to say this, Philip, he's actually nailed it there, ladies and gentlemen. The ATC curve will,
Well, you're asking first.
the ATC curve will,
Tend towards 0.
but what's another way of saying that? Fall continuously for a natural monopoly. So when we're drawing the ATC curve for natural monopoly, not to be confused with one for monopoly, the ATC curve falls continuously. Now, I guess, you know, if you're talking about the legend Nickel there and his response about it being L-shaped, yes, the rate at which it falls will decrease, Nickel, so therefore it is becoming more elastic as it reaches almost 0 cost. But the theory is that it'll fall continuously. And the reason for that is what, Alex? What's the reason for that?
Because as your output increases, the cost increases to the economies of scale.
And you've already made the very enormous initial costs, and so once you have the basic infrastructure in place, your actual marginal cost, it doesn't actually cost you that much to provide the service. Okay, so if we were going to say, as we have done for all the other market structures, if we were going to talk about the characteristics, you would say what? Rebecca? What would you say for characteristics? Significant and very substantial
barriers to entry,
in the form of,
infrastructure, cost,
or otherwise known as,
capital,
otherwise known as,
sunk costs.
sunk costs, correct. So we have significant barriers to entry, barriers, and I guess you could say and exit as well, because if you think, imagine the amount of money that Virgin spends on branding and advertising. So significant barriers to entry and exit. But you're going to be talking particularly sunk costs. Okay. Average total costs, we're saying fall continuously as output increases for the reasons described. Okay, now, what if I had, so this is Virgin Rail, what's it called now? It's not called Virgin Rail anymore. It's called, Max,
LNER,
which stands for?
London North East Rail.
Rail, yeah. Although I see that all the Virgin branding's not off the trains this morning, as I was sat at the top of, what's that street called, where the new police station is in Newcastle? What's that? Philip, you're probably in and out of there all the time. The Burnhamfield Bad Boys. What's that street called? You know the one I mean.
Next to Centre.
Next to Centre for Life, where the rail bridge is. Anyway, the train went over and it was still all the Virgin branding on it. But it's LNER, correct. Now, what if I wanted to set up GECO Rail? Excuse me? Oh, the microphone didn't pick that one up there, Serena, how rude. GECO Rail. Never fear, GECO Rail's here. Not right, Radhika? Now, why would that not be sensible? So LNER build a set of tracks, but I want to compete, so I build my own set of tracks. What's that? A very big waste of, Alex?
I was going to say, will they not calculate the most efficient route? So if you try and build a route.
Okay, possibly, but we'll not get into that. So what else?
I'm not sure.
Well, what would it be a waste of, from my point of view?
Money.
What's the sort of economic term to describe money? Resource. So if I was to build my own set of tracks, that would be a very wasteful duplication of resources. Because what's the point of me building my own tracks when there's already a set of tracks there? Now, if you think about our telecoms infrastructure, all the telegraph lines and poles and so on, it's all there already. What's the point of an outsider coming in and saying, we want to provide that service, so we'll build our own? That's madness. And that's aside from all of the sort of cost-benefit analysis where you'd look at, well, what's the negative externality effects of digging up the local countryside and building GECO Rail? GECO Rail would be the best, obviously. But there's all of those sort of wasteful duplication of resource. So in a natural monopoly, any competition tends to result in a wasteful duplication of resource. But of course, you know, I'm sure, as young, articulate, keen, enthusiastic, fresh-faced, budding economists, you know that the UK government has actually tried to introduce competition into the railway industry. So did they build multiple sets of tracks, Radhika?
No.
No. So how did the government, Radhika, try to introduce competition into the northeast line?
Do they not try and buy one of the ones all over you think companies or not?
Who?
The government.
No, I mean that it used to be a nationalised industry owned by the government, aka British Rail, but then they said private firms are much more efficient than government, let's try and make it more competitive.
Did they offer like private contracts to own part of the rails was sitting on? Yes.
Okay. So they said we'll have one set of tracks which is owned and managed by whom? Who owns and manages the railway lines in the UK? Yeah.
Network rail.
Very good. Did you hear that? What did he say? Network Rail. Okay. So you've got one set of tracks, and then companies like, and they call them TOCs, tickety-tock. Now what are TOCs? Train operating companies, such as Virgin, for example, formerly, they then bid for a franchise agreement, i.e. a license to run trains in the name of Virgin for the next 15 years on the line. And in return they say, okay, government, we'll probably pay you, I think the Virgin one, they said they'd pay them something like £4 billion over 15 years. Now, to generate that sort of income, they hoped for enormous numbers of people to switch from private car to public transport. And it just didn't transpire. Hence the reason that's the whole fallout with Virgin Rail. But you've got these train operating companies. So you've got Virgin bidding for a franchise. Who else bids for franchises on the railway? What are some of the other companies called? TransPennine, okay. What else? Or who else? Virgin shared the one from Newcastle to London. They shared it with another company called... I think, yeah, something like that, Robert. Yeah, Northern Rail.
It's cross country one.
Excuse me?
Cross country.
As in, I think it's a route, certainly. I'm not sure who operates the route.
It's like on the side of the train, it says.
Okay, alright. Can't do it. Can't do it. Like, okay, Sydney says cross country. We'll check that and get back to you. So, the TOCs bid for it. Now, that's all very well, but how long does a franchise last for? They used to be only, these franchise deals, let's say they were 10 years. Well, what would you expect a transport company to do to its rolling stock, to its food that they provide, to the number of journeys that they provide over time? What would you expect to happen? More, better, faster, cheaper? Johnston? Robert?
Would you expect it to upgrade it over time?
Exactly. Now, why would you not do that if you had a 10-year franchise? Why is it? Why, if I'm Richard Branson, am I probably thinking, I'm not putting 100 million into some new trains and new staff uniforms and running more services? Because
It's like a sunk cost, so you would put all of that money in, and then a few years later you wouldn't really own the franchise anymore. So.
well, the danger is you're nearly there, but not quite. The danger is that on year 10.
You might lose the franchise.
On year 10, the franchise comes up for renewal, you bid for it, 2 other companies bid for it, and then one of the other companies bids for it. So therefore, it's not in your interests to invest, because you don't know if you're going to be in it for the long term. So it's flawed in that respect. Okay? So I'm not going to note that, but hopefully you've been listening, and you need to put a little note down which just explains, number 1, how it operates. So you've got Network Rail and the train operating companies. And then number 2, I'll fast forward through this, ladies and gents. Number 2, I think you can do speedy films and speedy boarding. That's easy, gents. Speedy Gonzale. And I've got some newspaper articles here for you, ladies and gentlemen, from the Sunday Times. Ladies and gentlemen at home, viewers, look. Is this any way to run a railway? I'll just go through this whilst my students are making their notes. So this is about, here we have Chris Grayling. I'm sure you'll know him, he's the Transport Minister. And it says here, the Transport Secretary has been accused of bailing out the 2 companies running the East Coast Main Line. There's a whole Q&A there, ladies and gents. And I think there's another article as well. Oh wow, there is. Wow. Train operators promised fresh taxpayer cash. Now the irony, ladies and gentlemen, is this. When you ship something out from public sector to private sector, you expect to remove the burden from the public sector, i.e. the taxpayer, but actually we, for the last number of years, we're still paying into. We're still providing a subsidy to the rail network. I mean, that's madness. Anyway, those articles, ladies and gentlemen, for reference, 7th of January 2018, and this is a more recent one, 2nd of July. Wow, very up to date. Very up to date, Nicole. And a final characteristic then would be this. Dylan, what would you say are absolutely ginormous in an industry which is a natural monopoly, which really is also contributing to this downward sloping ATC curve? There are enormous, very good. I'll let Rebecca help you out on that one.
Economies of scale.
Economies of scale. Because as you continue to expand your service, because you've already made the big investment up front, your costs keep falling. So there are enormous economies of scale which can only be fully exploited by one firm.